Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So today we're going to talk about the perfect storm of events that are brewing right now around the world. And I want you to stick around for the latter half of this video because I have a very important message that everybody I think needs to hear right now. So please stick around for that. Okay, so new data shows that 50% of the population in the United States is not working. And of course, that is probably a good metric to apply to most countries right now who were affected by this in some way, shape, or form, or will be affected. 50% are not working. Now, it's kind of a misleading statistic somewhat because only 65% or something like that of the people who could work or at least were seeking work were ever working even before this happened. So it really only went down 15%. Still, 50% of people are not working right now. Apparently, there's been a mutation that the virus may have underwent. And we talked about this months ago when this thing first broke out, that there was allegedly a couple different strains. And what we seem to be finding, a lot of the stuff that was alleged when this first started is starting to become true in a lot of ways. So anyways, there was these two strains of the virus. One was less lethal, but it was far more contagious. I listened to a talk the other day by a gentleman who appeared to really know what he was talking about. He knew all the lingo. He appeared to have done a lot of research. It wasn't a sensationalist rant. It was very scientific and by the book and boring, like good science should be. I'll post a link to that in the description, but he talks about how he thinks the virus has already mutated to become much less lethal, but that the lethal strain is still out there and it is still mutating, although it's not mutating as fast as they originally thought. Now, the problem is, of course, is that there is still potential for mutation because this thing is now ravaging the southern hemisphere. Brazil, South Africa, India are all getting rocked by this virus right now. And the problem arises in fall when you're going to have this outbreak, be it just the tail end of the first wave or the start of a second wave. The problem is going to be when that coincides with flu season, because you can get both of these at the same time. That's been scientifically proven. Now, I presume that's going to increase the lethality of the illness, although it might not. There might be some interacting effects which nullify some aspects of the illness. I don't know. You'd have to go and do your own research on that. What we do know is that apparently there's a new swine flu which is circulating in China. Similar to bird flu, it's only circulating right now in the animal populations. So I'm not even really sure why it's news. Apparently it's allegedly some sort of cross strain between the 1918 one and the 2009 one and other various strains. So I'm not sure what the actual lethality of that is going to be. It's probably going to be pretty low, as swine flu typically is. Anyways, we have that coming out of left field. There's also some information that's come out that 50% of people who get the virus may have long-term health effects as a result of it. So there's a lot of talk that this is very similar to HIV, and if you get it, then there's going to be enduring health effects, immunocompromising health effects. So, like I say, I don't know the extent of that. I'm not saying that is the case. Go and fact check, cross-reference every single thing I say. This is just the tip of the iceberg with respect to all of this information. Of course, there's been these persistent locust swarms which have been ravaging the most developing parts of the world, India, parts of Africa, the Middle East, totally destroying the crops that they burn through. I don't know what the actual magnitude is of this. It looks very scary when you see it, on the media. It's very hard to determine the extent of the damage that is being done because, of course, reporting in these regions is kind of spotty and not entirely accurate, but really is reporting accurate anywhere nowadays. But of course, this could potentially put a big strain on the global food supply, raising prices even more. And as countries become more isolationist, and I was going to get to this later on, but there is a greater risk of conflict escalating. That's part of the problem with this whole COVID thing, is that as people shut their borders, not even necessarily a hard shutdown anymore, but in terms of restricting the movement of goods and people across borders, that starts to have the effect of solidifying and reinvigorating old rivals. So in an isolated world, there's a much greater potential for conflicts to arise. Maybe not World War III, but certainly some proxy conflicts, and definitely more subversion by governments. And you're going to see more. I mean, if everybody's trapped at home, then you can bet that Russian hackers, US hackers, Chinese hackers, everybody's probably having a feast right now trying to cause a shitstorm in everybody else's country, which is why you see the Hong Kong thing, you see the civil unrest in the United States, which is reaching a breaking point, I think, in a lot of ways. I do not, as I've always said, I don't think it's going to reach the point of civil conflict, but eventually you're going to have confrontations which are going to be armed between different groups of people, and that is just going to increase the divide. Now, it's just shocking to me that right now the Democrats are trying to put up Joe Biden, of all people. You'd think in a time like this, you'd at least try to put up somebody who can not only form a fluid sentence and stay coherent and not offend his own party's sensibilities every time he does some sort of live podcast, which is why they don't really get him to do that much, and which is why you'll never see him on a show like Joe Rogan, like a lot of candidates have gone on there. It's amazing to me that they're going with this guy. I can't see, like, they got to be really, really stupid, or they really, really want to lose if they're trying to put this guy up there. Or people really just aren't that intelligent in thinking that, okay, we're just going to play it safe with Biden and hope we win. That doesn't happen anymore. You got to, if you want to do something nowadays, you got to be wild about it. We are living in the age of extremes. I said that many years ago when Trump got elected. This is the age of extremes, and the only way you are not going to win over the masses with the cordial, tired, dry-eyed approach that you've used time and time again, and everybody knows is just phony. So at least if you're going to put somebody up there, put somebody with charisma, for Christ's sakes, because that's the only thing that's going to give the Democrats any hope in fall, I think. But, you know, we all are in our own sort of digital filter bubbles, meaning that if all you watch is conservative media, then that's all YouTube is going to show you in your sidebar. You're not going to see the alternative opinion. Now, I see both sides of the coin, so, you know, it's hard to see. It's hard to say, I should say, what is going to come. I don't really have a prediction about what's going to happen in the elections. It seems like the word on the street is that Trump's going to win. But when you look at all the mainstream media and when you look at sort of the consensus reality, it appears that Biden may have the upper hand. I don't know how, but anyways, it is what it is. Apparently, there's a national coin shortage, so something going on with the U.S. Mint. I guess they're not printing as much coins, which of course is going to prompt or expedite the bringing in of course, the cashless society, which is really right around the corner. If it's not here already, honestly, I seldom ever use cash anymore. It's just very inconvenient. And then, of course, you have the whole don't wanting to spread germs thing. So it's an excuse for them to get rid of cash. And of course, if you can't have cash, you can't do transactions for things. You lose a lot of freedom. So I'm certainly not against cash. I would hope that cash would always be there for me to use if I wanted it. For instance, there's certain products that I've been banned from selling on my website, CanadianPreparedness.com, due to PayPal's very ambiguous restrictions about what can be sold. So we're entering an era where anything the impersonal powers that be decide is unsafe or the people shouldn't have, they're going to make it harder and harder for you to get it. So, for instance, the item in question was katana swords. We sell the real deal cold steel katana swords on my website. Now, PayPal totally shut down our ability to receive payments through PayPal. And PayPal is a pretty big service. I mean, we only marginally noticed it in our sales. So it wasn't like, you know, PayPal has total dominion over payments yet. But, I mean, they're certainly getting there. But there's still a lot of other options out there. But once Visa and MasterCard and even Google Pay, Apple Pay, and even Shopify, if that keeps going, and Amazon, of course, once they say, you know, we're not going to allow this stuff to be sold, then where are you going to buy it? How are you going to buy it? You can do an e-transfer, sure, but maybe Interact or e-transfer or whatever company oversees that decides, hey, we don't want that either. So then you're left to what? Barter for stuff? I don't know. It's not looking good. Anyways, what else do we got here? Okay, we got Iran who wants to arrest Trump. It's obviously, it's kind of a silly thing to really talk about because the plausibility of that ever happening is not even really worth talking about at all. But it does show that there's a lot of tension there still left over from the killing of their general back in January, and that's been almost completely wiped out of the history books because of this whole COVID thing. But that's still there, that's still ongoing. There's still a lot of tensions in the Middle East, and it's going to get even more tense there as oil prices take a hit and their economies take a hit in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia had to raise its taxes something like threefold. So, you know, they're all struggling. There's going to be a global economic downturn. The IMF is saying that there's going to be a 10% contraction globally in the market. And while that doesn't sound like a lot, 10% economic contraction is more than just 10% unemployment and a 10% reduction in standard of living, because it has all these other cascading effects, which is going to make life much more difficult than just 10%. Remember, we are used to economic expansion. So when you go into the red and then deep into the red, like 10%, and that is just based on what has happened so far this year. We still have the rest of the year to go. If this gets bad and if the hospitals get overwhelmed, we know that they're going to push for lockdowns again. Because for whatever reason, you know, all of the other ongoing crises in society that we could have fixed while the grid was up, you know, the things like poverty and all this stuff, you know, those things apparently don't matter as much as people being put in hospital hallways. And I'm not saying that, you know, that's, I would hope that they would do it more surgically than they could do it the first time. I understand we don't want anybody to unnecessarily die as a result of this. Life is the most precious thing. People can get new jobs in the future, but there does come a point. There does come a point where the economic damage that we cause is going to have greater impacts and may cause a greater loss of life in the long run. So that said, I think that if the hospitals start to get overwhelmed, they will likely put a lockdown into place once again, at least in those affected areas. I don't think it's going to be national as it was, because now all these states and provinces of the world have had their experience with it. They have their own protocols on how to deal with it, so they can do it on a state-by-state basis, perhaps more effectively. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but I'm guessing that in the places that the virus is starting to ramp up right now again, it's going to happen. And right now you're seeing much lower death rates. There's a lot more testing being done. Some people are chalking that up to the fact that it hasn't had enough time to that the death rate tends to lag behind, and we've seen that throughout this whole pandemic. The death rate always lags the number of cases, so we're likely to see a spike based historically anyways. If this information about the new, less lethal mutation is true, which is still, as far as I know, it's not scientifically proven yet, but there's a lot of evidence to support it. If that's the case, then we might not see a huge spike, but we certainly will see some spike in fatalities in the coming weeks here. So we also have China, the Indian border thing, and if you don't know what happened there was a clash between India and China. Many soldiers died on both sides. Apparently, India lost 20 soldiers because they're honest about their numbers. China didn't disclose how many soldiers it lost because it doesn't tell the world anything about what's going on. But apparently it was a hand-to-hand combat situation because it wasn't demilitarized, I don't think, but they had agreed to not use actual weapons, like ranged weapons on each other. So it was a melee clash. So it was a very brutal engagement that they had on the border there. Now, all of this, of course, over land issues. I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons with regards to the virus. Of course, India is being ravaged by the virus, where now China is saying it isn't. Some people suspect it still is. In some ways, it's hard to believe that it isn't when they're still 100% operational. What else do we got going on? We have Dr. Paul Beckwith, who's talking about potential food shortages as a result of drastic changes within the jet stream. We've known that this has been going on for a long time now. This is due to the Arctic warming and the hot-cold differential between the poles and the equator. So the the hotter the equator gets and the hotter the Arctic gets, the less of a heat differential there is. So that creates a far more unstable jet stream. When there's lots of cold on the top of the planet and when there's lots of warm around the equator, which is typically how it is, it's cold at the poles and it's warm at the equator. When you have that, that creates a nice jet stream. That creates the flow of air that circulates the planet, essentially, in the northern hemisphere. And if the Arctic is warming up disproportional to the rest of the planet, it totally throws that whole system out of whack, which can, of course, cause extreme weather patterns, which can compromise the food supply, which has been rocked by the pandemic, but could potentially be rocked more so in the same way if we continue to see more supply chain disruptions as a result of further lockdowns, further restrictions, escalating tensions between countries, etc., etc., etc. Probably one of the most substantial things that are going on right now is that there's this political tension in the United States, which doesn't appear to be letting up in a lot of ways. Now, I don't think it's as bad as the media and the alternative media is saying it is. I'm still quite certain that the majority of people are going about their days and that a lot of these incidents are isolated. It's not that the entire country is tearing at each other's throats. The majority of people are still working. There's still order, with exceptions of some small pockets of unrest and, of course, protests that is happening. But I worry that it's going to escalate when you start to have clashes between protesters. Once you start to have armed clashes between protesters, that's when it's going to heat up to a new level. And what the outcome is going to be, it's probably just going to be more riot police in the streets, or I really cannot see it materializing into a civil conflict because, like I said, the polarity isn't there. The bipolarity is not there. Yes, there are definitely two distinct sides going against it right now, but it's so interspersed and there's so much intersectionality across the board with all these things that you'd be fighting your neighbors, you'd be fighting your kids, you'd be fighting your daughter's boyfriend, whatever, right? So it just, there's too many overlapping differences and similarities there that would ever take place. But you know what? I could be wrong. The way things are going now, it's really raining outside right now in a bad way. And I wanted to go and do some filming of some survival gear tomorrow. Just going to do a quick pitch here. We got these 100-watt folding solar panels by Nitecore. 24% efficiency, they claim. And if you know anything about Nitecore, this is a premium brand. This is probably one of the most premium flashlight brands on the market right now, and they're starting to get into that whole renewable energy space, and they claim to have a 24% efficiency solar panel, which is very high and a very bold statement. So I guess we will see what happens there. Anyways, I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about than what I've talked about here, but I also want to talk about the charge of fear mongering on this channel. Just as the saying goes in the media, if it bleeds, it leads. The sad reality of the time we are in is when a lot of people are on edge is that people like exciting content. And I'm not the one to give people that comedic type excitement. Sometimes I do. When things start to settle down, I'll get back to maybe even get back to the All-American Prepper stuff. But a lot of people took offense to that. So that's why I kind of put it on the back burner. But, I've done some skits, and I like having fun when, people want to have fun. But it appears to me right now, people want to know what's going on, and they want to know how to prepare for it. Now, my message on this channel has always been, be prepared, not scared. And to me, if you look at civilization, 99.999% of civilization has been very, very rough. It's been wars, it's been death, disease, suffering, just injustice after injustice. It's really only in the last 50 years that there's been a relative state of peace in the world. I mean, even up to the Vietnam War, everybody was pretty much on edge, you know, up to that point. And then things really after the 70s started to stabilize in a global way in a lot of ways. So as preppers, we acknowledge that the normative state of human affairs is war and crisis. That's the norm. The norm is that life kind of sucks, and that throughout most of human existence, the human experience has been marred by cries and screams and aggression and lots of negativity and fear, okay? Because fear kept us alive. It's only within the last few decades have we really adapted a new world where we don't have to live at the whim of our emotions more so than the whim of our intellect. It's now that we have the luxury of all these laws and regulations and rules that govern society that we can kind of put our defenses down. The problem is some people go too far in terms of putting their defenses down, and other people, preppers amongst us, myself at times, have gone too far in the other direction. We've been too pessimistic or too cynical. But I will say that everything in nature, for the most part, lives in a constant state of fear or excitatory state where, you know, they're either aggressive or they're fearful. There's very few moments throughout the day that there's just a sense of bliss. There's always an underlying anxiety about survival with every single animal except human beings. And so part of the reason why I am cynical and pessimistic, and I have no problem saying that. People will say, well, why don't you just be happy? Well, if what I'm doing is in some way, shape, or form inspiring people to be prepared, and certainly not, I've always said on this channel, don't live your life in fear. You know, if nothing happens, you want to have felt at the end of your life that you lived it to the fullest. You know, spend that time with your kids. You know, if you're watching the news 24/7 and your kid comes up to you and they want to play, turn off the damn TV and play with your kids. That's far more important. You have to do that kind of stuff, okay? And guilty as charged. This is notes to self, because I catch myself doing this all the time where I have to remind myself, hey, this is what's more important. But that said, to counterbalance society's unearned optimism about the state of things, we have to be a bit more pessimistic to kind of counterbalance that, because there's this kind of happy-go-lucky thing, like even now, like, oh, you know, like there's all this unemployment, but somehow the economy or the stock market is doing fine. Nobody is talking about the robbery that is occurring there. Everybody's talking about the looting of the stores. The looting of the stores pales in comparison to the looting that is happening right now on Wall Street. Because a lot of that money, the populace is going to pay for, and they're never going to see it again. And a lot of the middle class people with substantial investments in their 401ks and stuff, they see their portfolios remaining steady or even going up now in some cases, and they're thinking that everything is okay. But that's all money that somehow has to be paid back in the future. You are borrowing from the future, and that's why a lot of the poor people, even if they can't articulate it or don't even know it, don't even realize how much they're getting screwed, because yeah, they're out there because they're out of work, they're out of school. A lot of these kids, you know, and I'm not making any excuses for the stuff that they're doing, because I do not think it's constructive one iota, but they really are the ones who are getting screwed the most when you give them a $1,200 check and everybody else gets their stocks inflated 25%. And for some people, that's millions of dollars. For most people, it's thousands of dollars. But that's all money that has to come from somewhere, and they're banking on a really, you know, steady rise into the future, which may or may not happen. You know, things, everything, there's no rhyme or reason to what happens anymore. So things could get better, but my intuition that if I would have listened to throughout this whole thing, I would have been a millionaire, because I would have invested in gun stocks when my intuition told me to do that months ago when they were still low, even in March. Now you could probably still get in, and that's kind of where your prepping, forecasting can take you if you're willing to keep one foot in the door of civilization and you're not going to shut out the entirety of the world. Anyways, this is not a financial advice channel, so I don't want to be giving out any bad advice to people, so don't take my advice, do your own research. But I have an intuition that things are going to get worse before they get better. And just to explain to you what intuition is, I've done a whole video on intuition. Intuition, as I've heard it best described, is when you know something is wrong, but you just can't pinpoint the reasons why you feel that way. So there's something in the environment, there's something about what's going on right now is telling you, hey, something isn't right here. I should be either getting prepared, or I should, just not be in a state of complacency right now, because something bad is likely to happen. More often than not, my guts, my intuition about what is going to happen has manifested throughout this in some way, shape, or form. I did that video about civil unrest, well before the riots broke out. And now, what do you have? You literally have couples on their front lawns defending their properties against protesters with firearms. Okay, and that's exactly the thumbnail I used in my video. And that's just based on intuition. There's always that voice that says, well, it may not happen, but you really have to go with probabilities at this point. The probability is this virus is going to continue to spread. It's going to overlap with flu season. There's going to be a lot of civil unrest up until then, with pockets of it here and there. I'm not saying that the whole country is in flames or anything like that, but it's certainly going to ramp up as the United States approaches that election season. And people ask me why I focus so much on the United States. Man, what happens in the States, the whole world feels it the next day. Okay, if the United States economy tanks, the whole world economy tanks with it the next day. So that's why it's so important. That's why really all of these countries holding American dollars rely on the American worker. That's why a lot of the American workers are slaves. They don't realize it, to all the people who are holding these debt notes throughout the world. But that's another story unto itself. So here's what I think is the tendency of the media and the corporatocracy and whatever sort of central power system is pulling the strings behind the scenes. And I'm not saying it's like a shadowy conspiracy or anything like that. I think it's a lot of legalese and a lot of cronyism maybe, but I don't think it's like a skull and bones type situation, like, gets a lot of attention, the whole, eye in the pyramid, blah, blah, blah. There's definitely something to that, maybe, but yeah, anyways, that's another video into itself. Here's what I think is happening. They want people to be fearful but complacent. Preppers are fearful in many cases, legitimately, I say, because remember, more pessimism to counterbalance the naive sense of optimism and complacency, because most people don't realize that they live in a fishbowl, that they live in water. The fish doesn't know what's in water. Most people do not realize all of the things that have to be in place for their life to go on as it is. Technology, society, laws, all these institutions that we rely on to have a normal life. Obviously, some people got a taste of that, and that's why a lot of people have warmed up to the idea of preparedness recently, because they finally realized, yeah, nothing is God-given. Society is on thin ice. There's a thin veneer of civility that knits this whole web of interactions together, and at any point, it doesn't take much to rock that boat. And right now that the Fed is so leveraged, the economy is on thin ice right now. Any major crises that happened right now, I think would really cause another major crash. Not just a slow, gradual recession or depression, but a major crash. And that would only be the beginning of it. But they want you to be fearful of stuff, which is why in the media, it bleeds, it leads. They always want to keep your attention on something to get you in fear of something, right? But they don't want you to be self-reliant. Their solution is always to rely on this corporation or this government or this industry or whatever. They never want you to be self-reliant. So what we as preppers say is, yes, be fearful, because fear is a reasonable thing. Fear gets a bad rap, man, but fear is what is keeping almost everything out there right now fighting for its life alive. Fear is a positive thing. I mean, if you weren't fearful of getting hit by a car, you wouldn't get out of the way. Fear moves you into a place of safety and comfort. Yes, it can become counterproductive if your whole life is dictated by unfounded insecurities, and you isolate yourself from people and you become some shut-in, and it makes you all twisted in the head, and then you start doing stupid things, which can happen, right? We've seen that happen with a lot of extremist people out there who don't have the social skills right now to deal with this current world that we've created of a bunch of shut-ins, you know, with the whole social media thing. And now you got the whole Zoom apocalypse, if you want to call it that. I guess it's not the apocalypse. This is the dawn of the Zoom era, where everybody just stays at home. And if you guys only knew, I seen all this stuff coming over a decade ago. But, you know, I'm not going to try to brag about that, but anybody who knows me in my personal life, you know, I've been talking about that very thing for years. The only thing that differentiates us from animals now is that we don't oscillate constantly between fight or flight. Yeah, you'll see a deer chilling out, sleeping in the forest, but, you know, any twig snapping 30, 40 yards in the distance, that deer is going to pop right up. It's constantly in an excitable state. Human beings, no, we're just docile. And that's what the media wants. Be fearful and docile. So, oh, lights went out. There we go. It's a good feature, actually, because it saves your battery. I got my dash cam now, just in case. Reads have inspired that. So anyways, as humans, we've had that instinct dumbed down, and the media wants you to fear something that it views as marketable, but something that it knows will not make you self-reliant. And that's why, for the longest time, I believe that they were hesitant to legalize the green stuff, because they knew you could grow it. So if you can grow something, why would you ever need to, you know, buy it? And that's actually what's happening a lot here in Canada, is a lot of people are just growing it instead of relying on the overpriced stuff that you can buy at the store. Don't get me wrong, it's still a big industry, but that's just an example of that. So they want you to be fearful of superficial things. You know, if you look at any women's magazine, it's all about fear. Everything's about fear in this society. Every single thing, every single product. You need a bigger TV because, you know, you don't want people to think less of you. You need a better car because you don't want them to think less of you. You need plastic surgery. It's all about fear. The only difference is that preppers' fears, in my mind, are quite rational, because we look at 99% of history and we see that the human race has been marred by war, struggle, disease, death, and violence, and that there's been very few moments of happiness in between. Now, you could say that that's the stuff that gets sensationalized in the history books, and maybe history wasn't as bad, even the Dark Ages, as some people make it out to be. Maybe, you know, there's a lot of lore and stuff, and you know, just exaggeration that happens when stories are passed down. You could say that maybe some of history is that way, and maybe things weren't as bad. But, you know, judging by the life expectancies and, you know, the way that people dealt with problems in society and people who broke the law and stuff, I think it was probably, I think we're in the best time to live right now in terms of the ease of living. Not having to worry about getting your hand chopped off, or, you know, doing or saying something stupid. But you can take it too far. If you find yourself listening to these things and getting really scared and worried, you need to just go and do more research. Okay, if you really find that you're really scared about one thing happening, go and find some information that runs counter to that, because there's a good chance that maybe you're blowing it a little out of proportion. Maybe you're making a mountain out of a molehill, which is not to say that these things I'm talking about here as a confluence also are not very serious, even in their own rights. But together, collectively, they're very serious. But that said, you should still go and get the other side of the story, just to give yourself a bit of peace of mind. Because the last thing I want people to do is be making any hasty emotional decisions. Because I understand that this platform, I have the ability to influence people in a very significant way. And it's something that I don't take for granted. And I think all YouTubers need to remember that you are directly affecting people's lives. People are coming to you for information for which they are going to make some pretty significant decisions, tangible decisions. Not just, you know, okay, I'll think about that, but hey, maybe, you know, I heard Nate say this, so I should go buy some land out here or something like that. So I don't really want to be accountable for that. Obviously, I think you should make your own decisions, but I understand the power of this platform to have that sort of influence on people. So I would always encourage you to go and seek the counterpoints of everything I say. And, I'll probably debate it with you in the comments section because, I'm convinced about certain things, but that's fine. We can agree to disagree or whatever, but I would still implore you to go and do that just for your own sanity, to make sure that you're not getting too taken off into any sort of la land. Because like I said, you don't want to live your life in the preparedness mindset, constantly looking over your shoulder and have regret that you felt that you didn't live your life to the fullest. Okay? But as a person who lives, breathes prepping, because that's what I'm now all about, right? Canadian prepper. I maybe have a bit more freedom to do that, and you can too. You can make a YouTube channel, you can make a store, and do that whole thing. But I think the average person, make this a part of your life, but not a huge part of your life. I think a lot of people are coming here lately just for my take on things, my take on current events like this video and stuff like that. So yeah, the gist of what I'm trying to say, and I do have notes here, just because I need some sort of guideline to follow to get all my thoughts on these issues out. But I do think, be prepared, not scared is the mantra to go by. Maybe to sum it up, how preppers think, and I shouldn't generalize all preppers, I can only speak for myself. How I view it is that this state of peace that the world has been in the last 50 years, even though I've only been alive for 39 of those, not 40 yet, 39 of those years, it's coming this year though, we'll all celebrate my birthday. You can all send me $10 and I'll be a multi-millionaire or something like that. How about that? It's not going to happen. Anyways, don't want that to happen because then you get too soft. I don't want anything given to me in life, and you shouldn't either. Anyways, what was I talking about? I don't believe that the state of peace that we're in right now is normal, and I don't think any prepper does. I think deep down we understand that, this is an aberration. There's more good in humanity than there is bad, but a lot of the bad is canned heat right now, and it's waiting to be unleashed. I think that there's some cathartic release. There's some blowing of the top. Like we see it happening with the mass shooting incidents where people just lose it. And it almost seems like collectively we're bound to experience that on a massive scale at some point. And maybe that's what the looting and the rioting was. I don't know. But it seems like there's a lot of stuff building up within everybody because this state of being is so unnatural. As great as it is, it's very unnatural what we're living in right now. This is new. This is all new. Like the whole thing, the swipe left or swipe right, swipe left culture, the YouTube, the having all of this information from all around the world, the ability to access any information at any given time. This is all brand new stuff. Like just think about it. In 2100, they're going to look back at 2020 and they're going to say that was the time when the internet was just getting going. So if you think that, there's not a chance for you to start something, an online endeavor yet, you're sadly mistaken. Imagine if the person who, some of these phone companies in 1920, because the phone was invented around the same time as the internet, and, relatively like 1900 versus 2000. I know it came around a lot earlier than that, like in the 1980s, but wasn't really, really common until kind of Google made it accessible for everybody, right? So imagine in 1920 thinking that, there's no more potential for doing this online stuff. There's so much potential, okay? If we can just get through this transformative process. What we morph into, I don't know. But I still believe that the default status, the default state of human beings is a state of war. But a part of me suspects that World War II wasn't the dividing line between the old world and the new world, and that there's still something that has to happen. There's still some sort of reckoning of sorts that has to happen. Now, I don't know what it is. I'm going to conclude on a completely unrelated subject. Hearing a lot right now about Facebook being boycotted by all these companies. What is that really about? Do you really think these companies care about these causes? Have they ever cared about these causes? Coca-Cola, have they ever cared about promoting their drink, which probably kills thousands, if not has killed millions of people indirectly just by, encouraging diabetes and obesity and all this stuff? I'm not saying that I don't want to get sued. I'm not saying that they've done that directly, but obviously the product that they're selling is not the healthiest of products. Do you seriously think they care about all these causes all of a sudden? Of course not. There's other motives here, guys. Clearly. This whole boycotting Facebook thing, whatever it is, I'm thinking a lot of these companies, maybe they're on the other end of the trade war and they're not liking that, so they're trying to do their best that they can to get Trump out of there. I don't know what it is, but even if I understand that for some people's minds, the ends justify the means. And so if you are a person who wants Trump out, then you would see it as a win either way, even if the corporations are just virtue signaling and they're not being sincere. But I don't know, man. It just seems so pathetically glib. And this is the really hard pill to swallow. It's that all of a sudden Facebook now looks like this bastion of free speech, when everybody has known for 10 years ago they were messing with the news feed, so you only seen certain things. That's why a lot of people bounced off that platform a long time ago. So this whole idea that we're the ones who are standing up for free speech and all that is that's total nonsense. So but that's how the media plays these games. And yeah, it's I better not go off on that tangent, because then this will be a very, very long video if I share my opinions about that. Anyways, guys, that's what I got for you today. Stay vigilant, but try to enjoy the summer. I still stick with my original hypothesis that for the majority of the beginning of July, possibly into August, we're going to see a relatively sideways trading economy. It's going to be stable. There's going to be some ups and downs. We're not going to get out of the recession, and we're not going to go into a deep, deep recession yet. It really depends on what happens with the virus and the election stuff, because that really could change everything. If the Democrats put up a different guy and they said, okay, we're not putting up Biden, things could get really heated. Things could get incredibly heated if they put up a more polarizing candidate. That, I think Biden, in some ways, now that I just think about it, in some ways, he might be what is preventing the tensions from escalating a lot, because he's not too far left, as far as left goes. Obviously, to the right, he's very far left, but in terms of the spectrum of the left, he's not that far left. But if you brought in somebody who is even more leftist and put him up against Trump, and I think Trump knows, he's the one who said, look, Bernie would probably have a better go at me than these other guys. And I 100% agree, because this is the time of wild cards. This is the time of extremes. And whether you like it or not, people want wild cards because they're just tired of being lied to. They're tired of, they're almost at the point where they're willing to take a loose cannon over the same old bullshit, right? Even though that same old bullshit might be more reliable. You can kind of set your watch to the lies that you're being told. At least with a guy like Trump, yeah, he's going to give you some honesty at times. Even though I think that what he's doing right now with, some of the tweets he's sending out, knowing that they're going to just create more divisiveness, I think he has a time. If I was him, and I'm not him, but if I was in that position and I had done what he had done in his life, and I was in a position where I could truly unify people and do something good for the planet, like truly leave a legacy of bringing people together in some way, shape, or form, I would try to do that at all costs, But again, it's all about re-election. So maybe it's a 4D chess move, you could say, that he's doing this so he makes sure he gets elected. Anyways, who knows? Who knows? I know some people think they know, but you don't. You don't know. Anyways, guys, take care. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you want to support this channel. check out CanadianPreparedness.com. We literally have every single high quality preparedness product you could want. And we try to get it to you at the fairest price possible. We do discounts, prepping gear, all caps, or survival prepper, all caps for 10% off. Free shipping over $200 to anywhere in North America. Free shipping over $75 anywhere in Canada. So, you know, capitalize on that. There's certain products we can't ship everywhere, like some of the bigger lithium batteries and stuff like that. If for whatever reason there's something on the site that you don't see that you might want, drop me an email, CanadianPrepper@hotmail.com. Yes, I have not changed my email yet. I'm going to be getting a professional business email, I promise. Believe it or not, it is a professional operation, but that's the story of my life. You know, I always have one thing, that one T that I didn't cross or one I didn't dot. You know, it's probably going to be like that for the rest of my life. Anyways, but we're getting that straightened out because I have a internet firm working for me now. So hopefully I can tighten everything up and make it really nice and clean and slick and professional. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care out there. Stay prepared, not scared. Canadian Prepper out.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com. Your one-stop shop for premium, high-quality, brand-name products that have been tried and tested by myself and other YouTube gear reviewers. My subscribers save 10% off by using the coupon code SURVIVALPREPPER. All one word in all caps.